Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Saturday. It's March 3rd, 2025. And today is 575 days since the attacks by Hamas on the south of Israel. Thank you for continuing to engage. I know many of you watch these updates regularly. There are so many crises around the world, in the United States, or wherever you may be, to pay attention to. And many have lost interest as the war on Gaza and in other parts of the world continues 475 days. There's still been no movement in terms of allowing humanitarian assistance into Gaza after more than 60 days. And in the news, we're hearing that things are heating up in the Middle East, and it's difficult to even say that when war and ethnic cleansing have been going on for 19 months. But in the words of a former Foreign Service officer who works with us at Churches for Middle East Peace, this is what he's described happening in the Middle East. Since Thursday, more information has come in. The big news in Israel has been the geographically very large wildfires and how they affected Memorial Day and Independence Day in Israel. Israel less publicly this week called up several reservist units to begin the, quote, final offensive in Gaza. And Israel decided to enter and restart the civil war in Syria on behalf of the Druze living there. Following up this last Thursday, Damascus airstrikes on Friday into Saturday with an airstrike on the presidential palace complex in Damascus and wider airstrikes on Latakia, Hama, and Dara. Those are Israeli airstrikes in Syria. The reservist units will take some time to get into place in Gaza. There's a recent Washington Post article about the current Israeli deployments and the removal of residents in Gaza. So Israel will be prepared to launch the final offensive 2 weeks to a month from now. On the Syrian front, the Israeli government, they're publicly talking about whether or not the IDF should move forward on the ground. From its months-old limited deployment on the Syrian side of the demarcation line, we talked about that several months ago, advancing its deployment to include Suwada, about 60 kilometers further into Syria than the present IDF deployment. Advancing to Suwada, the Druze capital in Syria, would be to the east and not towards Damascus in the northeast, but almost certainly it would have to include occupying Dara on the way, and also coming close to the Jordanian border with Syria. If nothing else, Netanyahu appears to have decided to close off two foreign policy avenues that the Trump administration has been considering. The final offensive in Gaza would end the Witkoff pursuit of a ceasefire hostage release, and then entering and restarting the Syrian civil war would derail any efforts of the Americans inside the administration or in Congress pursuing normalization with the new Syrian government. We've been giving updates on that regularly. Just a few additional comments, again, from this former Foreign Service officer about the escalation of the Druze militia and the Syrian state army. So this is related to Syria. Israel's Druze community and Syria's Druze community support one another, and they oppose one another's government. Israeli Druze serve in the IDF like Israeli Jews do. They're mostly loyal to Israel's occupation policies, and they frequently are senior officers in Kogat. That's the coordination body in the occupied territories for the Israeli military. Syrian Druze were an important part of the steadfastness front supporting Assad and hardliners on demanding the return of the Golan, occupied Golan Heights that Israel has control of now, back to Syria. Yet the two Druze communities intermarry, and Druze IDF soldiers have intervened on behalf of Syrian and Lebanese Druze as an approved sideline to their IDF jobs since at least as far back as the Lebanese Civil War. A delegation of Syrian Druze visited Israel and asked that intervention by Israel against the new Syrian government. This delegation was joined by dozens of Syrian Druze for festivities and visits to their Israeli Druze relatives. Each side, Israel and the new Syrian government, says that the other's lying about what happened in Damascus. You'll recall the proximate cause of the previous big flare-up in Syria was the Alawite militias ambushing a convoy of fighters allied to the new Syrian government. Like any civil war, there are going to be a lot of feuds acted upon. And at the same time, a government desperately wants to put its country back together again by inclusion or by intimidation, and likelihood both. But Israel's bombing to defend the Druze or further destabilize Syria, depending on one's viewpoint, changes all of the dynamics about what's happening with Syria drastically, to the point that it's hard to see how applauding Israel's bombing to defend the Druze works in anyone's favor other than Prime Minister Netanyahu. That's an end to that analysis, but when I read that, I thought that was actually incredibly helpful. And I wanted to move into an update in the news for the last 24 hours. There's no independence without the return of our loved ones. Thousands have called for the hostages' return in a rally in Tel Aviv at Hostages Square. So thousands gathered there. They were marking Israel's Independence Day. Many were survivors of Hamas's captivity, including the siblings Itay and Maya Regev, Omer Shem Tov. They addressed crowds and they called for the return of hostages. They said, we can't celebrate our independence while dozens of Israelis are denied their freedom, denied a voice, denied protection, and sitting terrified in these very moments. That was Maya Regev, who'd been taken hostage from the Nova Music Festival, along with Omer and Itay, and released in November 2023 in a hostage release and ceasefire deal. In terms of peace negotiations, Netanyahu said the time has come for Qatar to stop playing both sides with its double talk. He posted this on an official English language account saying just that enough of this double talk. He said it's either on the side of civilization or it's on the side of Hamas barbarism. It's difficult, almost impossible, to speak of independence when we know 59 of our people, brothers and sisters, have lost their freedom for 575 long, difficult, frightening, and endless days. Itay Regev said that in response, adding they're still there, innocent, held captive, without voice. Hamas did release a second video of an Israeli hostage, Maxim Herkin, in Gaza captivity. He's 35 years old, a resident of Carmel, was born in Ukraine, and his mother holds Russian citizenship. And in February, Israel's ambassador to Russia, Halperin, said that Moscow is handling his release. In Gaza, the reports indicate that 39 people have been killed since this morning local time there. A baby girl died of malnutrition and dehydration at Rantisi Hospital west of Gaza City, more than 2 months after the start of Israel's blockade on the Gaza Strip. At least 57 people have starved to death in the enclave because of the blockade. Israel's war on Gaza has killed at least 52,495 Palestinians, and 118,306 have been wounded. An estimated 1,139 people were killed in Israel during the Hamas-led attacks on October 7th. Al Jazeera says that the border closing, they told the story about a local Palestinian in Gaza saying that the border closure is destroying us. Gaza is facing starvation. They told the story of a 9-month-old Khaled, barely 5 kilograms, which is about 11 pounds. 11 pounds at 9 months old. That's half of what a healthy baby should be. He's in Gaza's main pediatric ward. Doctors have tried to save him. There have been emergency visits for nearly a week. He was fed by a tube feeding, and then he was given supplements and bottled milk, which is distributed every 3 hours or more. And it's yet to be seen whether or not Khaled, the 11-month-old or 9-month-old baby, will make it. In Israel, to confirm the analysis I started with, the Israeli forces are set to issue tens of thousands of call-up orders for Israeli reservists as they're expanding their Gaza operations. Turkey has said that they will not allow Netanyahu to fly over their airspace ahead of a visit that he was planning to Azerbaijan. Netanyahu just announced that that visit is now postponed to a later date because of everything that's happening in Gaza and Syria. Syria has detained the Damascus-based leader of the prominent Palestinian faction, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. That group was close to the former Assad regime. Talal Naji is 79 years old. He's the leader of the PFLP. He was detained on Saturday morning after he left his house with a driver and 2 guards. The Syrian government told the Associated Press that Naji was taken for questionings and could be released later. I'm at the time of day when my pups all want some attention. So Moose is joining me now. The PFLP, the head of, was arrested in Syria. The IDF said last night that 5 wounded Druze citizens had to be evacuated to Safed. Ziv Medical Center after sustaining injuries. So that's in Israel. According to report, Israeli planes landed in Sueda in South Syria on Friday night and handed out food to the Druze population. The group International Fellowship of Christians and Jews said that humanitarian aid is amounting to 1,500 packages of food to Druze and Christian residents in South Syria. In terms of the U.S., Trump has said his decision to dismiss Michael Waltz, the national security advisor, was partly driven over his anger for the private talks that Waltz had with Benjamin Netanyahu about striking Iran. And Netanyahu distanced himself from Mike Waltz on an X post today, denying the report's claim that the two had intensive contact on potential military operations to be used against Iran. I wanted to close by an update from the Presbyterian News Service that happened yesterday. The National Middle Eastern Presbyterian Caucus wrote 2 open letters calling for the PCUSA to strengthen its advocacy for Christians in the Middle East. One was concerning Christians in Syria and the other Palestinians in Gaza. The first letter calls for advocacy specifically on Christians in Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine, about the persecutions they're experiencing alongside of other religious minorities. And the second letter raises concerns about disparity and how the denomination advocates for the rights of migrants in the U.S. and advocacy efforts concerning displaced Palestinians in Gaza. Just want to read this quote. Thousands of Palestinian families face the imminent threat of displacement from their homeland, a situation that stands in stark contrast to the Christian principles of justice, compassion, and support for the oppressed. Therefore, through the NMEPC, we appeal to you to play an active role in defending the rights of Palestinians, especially those in Gaza, who remain in their homeland without the threat of forced displacement. In the letter, the caucus urges the denomination to actively defend the right of the Palestinians in their homeland, and to continue their vocal efforts to defend migrants and refugees around the world. We're grateful for so many denominations and leaders and Christians who are using their voice and speaking out. You know, the PCUSA is one of CMEP's 36 member communions. We're grateful for all of those who continue in their prayers and their efforts and your advocacy. Grateful for you. Do not give up, and may God continue to go before us in our efforts towards justice and peace. Amen.